Good afternoon. We're down in Westminster. We're going to do an interview of a protester. Were you here yesterday?
I was here yesterday and
Saturday. And there's no way you did that, did it?
No.
No. So do you believe in peaceful protesting?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. What do you think about defacing monuments where people have fought and died for our country to give us freedom?
I would say...
Because we would be German otherwise, wouldn't we?
I mean, in a way, you'd have to ask, like, we would the Queen's German.
Pardon?
I mean...
Yeah, but
so,
Hitler, if you look back through history, Hitler was a bit of a dictator as well.
Absolutely. I think Winston Churchill to a lot of people represents things like the war and to the Second World War and what it means to defeat people like the Germans and the Nazis. I also think when people look at a statue like Winston Churchill, they don't just see the war and the good things that he's committed, but they see the many atrocities that he's committed to people of colour as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. What he did in Africa was completely wrong. I do know my history, and but I think Churchill did redeem himself during World War II. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here now standing talking, I don't think, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, you would have to go under the definition of what you think redeeming yourself would mean.
I think if we were actually German and Hitler actually got into power, it would have been a completely different sort of society than we have now. Because the guy he'd done some atrocities which are unbelievable. But defacing these, I believe in police protests, peaceful protests, and yes, what happened in America is wrong, but it's brought violence to our country now.
And not just America, but it's also, we see many injustices over here.
Yeah, that's right. We see them all the time. It doesn't matter. To me, I went to a BMM march on Saturday and Sunday, and they were both peaceful.
Yeah.
And brilliant people. I had conversations with them. I could debate with them, and no problems. But what happened yesterday? What do you think happened yesterday?
I think people had enough, honestly. I think people had enough of what generally feels like a hopeless cause in so many people. I've spoken to many rioters, I've spoken to many protesters. I feel like many of them generally feel like they don't know how else to get their voices heard. When we see things like George Floyd, when we see things like even going far back as 2014 with Trayvon Martin, we see that something has happened for many years and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. So we've gone through the peaceful protest. Martin Luther King, was a peaceful protester. He created the Civil War Act, for Christ's sake. But we still see things like police brutality, racial injustice, and how many more peaceful protests would it take for change to really happen? I feel like that's generally the sentiment between some people.
If you're going to go down not peaceful protesting, like rioting, defacing monuments, you think that's the right way to go?
I mean, I do believe that in cases like Bristol, when they took down the statue of a slave owner, I do believe that statue should have been taken down. Maybe not in the same way that they did, like maybe not just completely pull it down, but
probably put into a museum, I would have said.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like to put something that is really just a symbol of slavery in the public town square is, I'm sure to many people it might be a symbol of something else. Like as you said, Winston Churchill's a symbol of the war.
Yeah.
But to the other person, to a person of colour, they might look at that and see literally a symbol of just straight discrimination.
Yeah.
And because of that, I don't know whether or not it should have been up there in the first place.
I would agree with you. But don't you think the British people should be reminded of what they actually did, the history,
but we could do it in the same way that the Germans do it, for example. We don't when the Germans teach of the Holocaust, we don't put a statue of Hitler in the town square as a celebratory act. We educate them, and we try to find out. We generally put an emphasis on it was the wrong thing to do. Whereas I don't generally see putting a statue of a slave owner in the middle of a town square as something of a reminder, as more of a celebratory act.
Okay. If you're going to go into slavery, right? You think the white man just put the black man into a slave mode, is it?
Slavery. Let's not just put it on a white versus black issue. Slavery has existed for generations, and slavery has existed between multiple colours.
It's not the generations; it's for the beginning of time.
Exactly. But however, I don't think one country's slavery has been in any way comparable to things like the British and American slave trade, which was largely discriminatory.
Well, do you know the American slave trade? I'll just let you know. It was the black man who was actually selling the black man, the Africans, to America, and a lot of Africans actually got rich off it. You do realise that, don't you? Through your history.
We have terms for those people.
Yeah. And I've got terms for them. It's wrong. Slavery is wrong in all manner of respect.
However, even on that situation, I won't use those words right now.
Yeah.
But the words that we do have for those people, those aren't looked favourably upon black people either.
Yeah, it's not. Yes.
And make no mistake, whether or not they helped white people during slavery as well, they were still going to be discriminated against whether or not they were helpful.
Don't you think it has improved as far as how can I put it? Ethnical.
I think racial tensions have improved from the say 1960s to now.
Yeah. From where we were before, when they were actually racist in this country. A lot of people aren't now.
I would say that there has been. I think it'd be maybe a bit ineffective to say that there hasn't been steps taken to improve racial tensions between different colours within the United Kingdom and America. I do think we have a very, very long way to go there.
So how do you think that we could change things then? Peacefully in mind, because I think we have to come together and realise that we have one common enemy in this, and it's that lot there. Because if it wasn't through their legislations and everything else, we wouldn't be in this position now.
Well, it's interesting that you'd say that. I think from my personal viewpoint and
they're not fighting for you in there.
Say again?
They're not fighting for you in there.
Of course.
They're not fighing for us either. All they're doing is filling their pockets.
I think that is part of the problem.
They don't care about the British people. That's the problem.
I don't think. Well, I'd say I'd go further to that and say they don't care about the vast majority of the people because they don't fit a certain mold. They do not fit a certain. I'm trying to look for the words. They do not fit a certain class bracket.
Yeah.
And maybe on some of them, I wouldn't say that I can speak for all of them, but maybe some of them a certain racial bracket as well. I think that Westminster and I think that the current parliament that we do have isn't for not just black people, but also for people of the working class, also for people from other countries, any illegal immigrant, even Eastern Europeans, for instance.
Yeah, but don't you think our country is starting to get full? There's over, 66 million people in this country now.
Yeah.
We can't keep on importing people into the country to help us when we should actually be changing the education system, like the hospitals and stuff like that. We need help with NHS, but they've known this for years, and the problem is they haven't trained them. All they've done is import them from other countries, which they should never have done in the beginning. They should have pushed the unemployed back into work. We've got loads of unemployed in this country, and after this virus, we're going to have about 5 to 6 million people unemployed. Businesses are going to go bust. So what do we do? Like, how do we help all races to get back to work doing this? Notice I'm not saying one race. Do you mean? It's all British people. I think we all need to work together to solve all problems, all injustices in this country, and that includes child abuse and stuff like that. But how do you see your way of getting out of all this? I can only see one way myself.
Are you asking as how my views, like
Yeah,
say,
yeah, your views.
in terms of politically.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do see, even if we, again, since we're talking about like the hotly debated topic is Black Lives Matter, and
Yeah.
we just went into like I said, something like I briefly mentioned the working class.
Yeah.
I do believe that, coming from my personal political standpoint, even if you look back in history with the slave trade,
Yeah.
a part of the reason the slave trade did exist was because it was profitable.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to a product of capitalism. I believe that capitalism has played a very large part in not just racial tensions, class tensions, and even things like LGBT rights is very much fueled by capitalism. I think we've seen a lot of people, both on the right and left of the political spectrum, who don't necessarily even believe what they believe, but are fueled by the money and by the capitalist system to maybe I would say maybe even a way divide us more.
I think politics is a way to divide us. Race is another way to divide us, and I believe this is actually the start of a race war. I don't want to see that, and the only reason I'm saying that is because of COVID. Because COVID didn't work. It hasn't worked.
I don't necessarily believe it's the start of the race war, because
I hope not. I hope not.
believe that-
I hope not.
I believe that Black Lives Matter, as much as it might get misconstrued in the media, and as much as it might get misconstrued by other people, it's not a white versus black tension.
I hope not.
It's not even a white versus black tension. It's really and truly, it's us versus everyone. When I went to the protest on Saturday, it wasn't just black people protesting. It was white people.
Oh yeah,
it was Asians. It was people from Mexico. It was literally everyone.
Believe it or not, I went to Merthyr Tydfil on Sunday, and there was only 100 people there, all peaceful, great. But I've got to admit, there was 85% were white, supporting BLM, and that's fine. I really enjoyed that. That was fine. But what happened here yesterday was this, and I know this for a fact, is instigated by Antifa, and this is the problem we have in this country. America's already deemed them as a domestic terrorism organisation because they're actually paid. They're professional paid, and they're the only ones who.
Done the KKK as a hate group.
Pardon?
I mean, it's interesting that they've not deemed the KKK as a hate group. Though, but
Well, they should. They should, because that's wrong as well. That's racist. You know, they're totally. Antifa are paid. You do realise that?
Antifa are paid, sorry, did you say?
Paid.
Oh, they're paid.
They paid protesters to cause problems. Now, a normal protester will come out and be peaceful, but Antifa won't. They take it a step too far. Like all the riots in America, that's down to Antifa. They're all employed to do it.
Can I ask you a question? Outside of maybe the violence that Antifa commit, because I mean, I'm not going to say there's no violence that Antifa have committed.
Yeah.
But just going off of what they claim to be, would you say you support them?
I won't support an organisation which induces violence within our communities. No, I wouldn't do that. Or our cities. That's wrong. We shouldn't be using violence. We're supposed to be a peaceful nation.
I ask that only because, I mean, I think Antifa's main message is in the name, anti-fascist.
Yeah.
And right now the conversation is on Churchill.
Yeah. Him, but there.
I mean, a big proponent of World War II was fighting fascism.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, you could make the argument that Antifa...
But they're not today. They're not fighting fascism.
I mean...
They will jump on anything if it's... Antifa will jump on anything. Like the left marches during Brexit, they get involved. They're willing to come out and fight. Do you mean? They were here on January, and they were trying to cause problems all over the place. And even though it was all Brexiteers, they just came to infiltrate and cause a little bit of violence. That was the only reason why there was about 3 fights around here, and it was all down to Antifa.
See, I'm not going to challenge you on any.
But they're actually white. This is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
But do you mean Antifa will fight for any cause which they paid for, and Soros pays them. You realise that, don't you? He ships them in all over the country to protest. Yeah.
I'm not too educated on Antifa, so I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put my opinion out there one way or the other.
Yeah.
But
I do a lot of research.
but I don't.
I'm not biased with them. If they were peaceful protesters and they supported every injustice like myself,
Yeah.
then that's fine. I've got no problem whatsoever with that. It's brilliant, like, you know. But they don't.
But I mean, even you yourself said the vast majority of the protests.
Yeah, I would say the people who were here yesterday, 95% of them were probably peaceful protesters. Fine, that no problem. But the 5% were the troublemakers coming into London or living in London just to cause trouble, a racial divide.
We get that from every protest. I think even on the right, you have protests. Tommy Robinson's group, for instance, you see reports of violence from them when they were doing their protests.
Have you ever been on a Tommy Robinson's protest?
I wouldn't dare.
No. Right. I attended
Actually,
one.
No, let me change it. I would love to go to Tommy Robinson's
Yeah,
protest, actually.
and I tell you what, you'd be accepted. But the grooming, I've got problems as well with that. Don't you believe it? Because any violence that comes along with it, I don't like. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to protest. As long as you peaceful protest, it's fine. He came out. He stands for grooming gangs across the country. All these Pakistan men raping children, and it is happening. But it's also white. I also understand that grooming gangs can also be white. Do you know what I mean? So I do see the concept. But he has actually highlighted the issue around the country.
Okay.
Or perhaps EDL and all that. You know, but so what?
And I mean,
what
again,
do you
I'm
think?
not gonna. I'm the topic of grooming gangs. I'm not the most educated on that, so I'm not going to speak one way or the other. Just because for the off chance that you may be right and I may be wrong.
Yeah.
I do think that in every protest you will find
an element.
negativity. Yeah,
you'll find an element of trouble.
But that doesn't necessarily encompass the overarching message of that protest.
Yeah. So, with all these people here yesterday breaking the COVID rules and the distancing rules around the country, right? Why aren't all these people out for child abuse? And I don't mean grooming gangs. I mean the rape and murder of our children right across the country, the paedophiles and everything else. Why can't we get this sort of? Because I organise demos. Do you mean back in Wales? I do awareness days and stuff like that, and we can't get these numbers out.
Okay.
So why don't people care also about our children of this nation? Because we've got to put a stop to this.
Well, again, I think when we're talking
Sorry,
about,
you're safe here. You're fine.
I think when we're talking about things like grooming gangs and stuff, again, I don't have all the information.
No,
on it,
I'm
so
on about
I wouldn't be
paedophilia in
able-
general.
I wouldn't be able to ask you. I wouldn't be able to answer why there's not people out there.
Yeah.
But I do find that some of the things that I could maybe be knowledgeable a little bit more about, especially, I would say just for argument's sake, I'll call them right-wing causes.
Yeah.
They might not be as much favourability just because maybe some of them aren't necessarily drawn out as 100% factual, in my opinion.
Yeah. You do realise that Britain is the paedophile capital of Europe, don't you?
Say that again, sorry?
You do realise Britain is the paedophile capital of Europe.
I don't know.
Yeah. And that is one major problem. Okay, thank you for your interview.
Welcome,
And you have a good day.